Well, offshore drilling is an expansive process. There's major environmental harm through every part of it. Whether you care about clean beaches, whales and wildlife, fishing opportunities, local economies, quality of life, environmental justice, what the coast will look like for your grandkids, all these signs, point to saying no to new offshore drilling.
This is the biggest and most immediate threat to our coastlines, and we intend to stop it. But there's a million little things, whether it's plastic pollution or water quality or adapting our coastlines to incoming climate change that we're working on day in, day out. So if you love your beach, love your surf spots, and love your community, we encourage you to get involved.
Welcome back to the Surfrider podcast, brought to you by the Surfrider Foundation. My name is David Scales. I'll be your host. Last year, we published an episode about the current administration's unprecedented and dangerous new offshore drilling plan that would open up vast stretches of U.S. coastline to new oil and gas leases. There have been some really important developments in that plan, and so I wanted to bring you up to speed on those things today. Through the end of the year and into January, the Bureau of Ocean and Land Management asked for the public to make comments about these lease proposals, and Surfrider opened up a portal on their website so that you could easily access the comment section and share your thoughts. You showed up in force to oppose offshore drilling, and so I figured that you might want an update on what the result would be for such a strong opposition. So I rang Surfrider's Ocean Protection Manager, Pete Stauffer, along with Surfrider CEO, Dr. Chad Nelsen, to learn whether the federal government has an obligation to listen to the populace and what the next steps in this highly complicated and consequential process would be. So first, here's Pete Stauffer, and then shortly thereafter, you're going to hear from Dr. Chad Nelsen.
David, yes, we saw an incredible response during the recent comment period. As a quick recap for your listeners, in late 2025, the federal government proposed offshore drilling in over 1 billion acres of U.S. ocean. So off the entire California coast, off Alaska, the Arctic Ocean, and most of the Gulf of Mexico, proposing new oil and gas drilling. There's been tremendous pushback to this proposal. Nearly 300,000 people spoke out against it. That comment period is over, but the campaign is not. We're expecting a final decision later this year. Right now, Surfrider is urging people to contact their members of Congress to speak out against the plan. And later this year, there will be a final draft of the proposal that will initiate one more comment period. We're going to mobilize folks from coast to coast, and we're going to stop this plan from getting implemented.
So from the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, do we know, was this comment period procedural? Was it something that they do all the time? And is there a certain number of comments or signatures that would require a certain action from them?
Yes, so under federal law, the federal government is required to consider public input when finalizing an offshore drilling plan. So this is part of the process. And so, yes, this comment period was required under law, and the agency must consider this feedback that they received.
What does that mean in layman's terms? And is there a way to measure the impact of the petition? Or does Surfrider have direct contact with somebody at the Bureau where we can kind of get follow up and,
Yeah, I mean, I think, David, to answer your question, there's no magic number where if we got 1 million signatures that the plan would be canceled. At the end of the day, it's at the executive branches, it's their decision. What we're trying to illustrate is that this plan is massively unpopular. At some level, it's a political decision. And so we want to make it clear to the current administration and to the staff at these agencies that the public in Florida, the public in California, and the public in Alaska doesn't want to see this happen. And, that's overwhelmingly the case. It's a wildly unpopular plan. And Pete can go into the huge sort of variety of people. It's not just surfers and environmentalists. There's a huge swath of interests that are opposed to this plan.
Got it. Where are we at in the federal decision-making process in the plan itself? What happens next? And if the administration moves forward with their proposal, when would we expect to see leases go for sale?
So the federal government is expected to make a final decision on the offshore drilling plan before the end of this year. In terms of where we're at in the process, the agency is currently reviewing those public comments. We hope their next step will be to release a final draft of the plan sometime this spring or summer. There will be one more final public comment period, and then the federal government will finalize that plan. In terms of when leasing could begin, that could start as soon as 2027. It could start next year off the California coast, in the Gulf of Mexico, and off Alaska.
Got it. Okay. The administration's rationale to the American public for opening these leases revolves around, quote, energy dominance, lowering oil and gas prices for consumers, economic security or prosperity. Which of these claims are actually the strongest, and are there any that actually don't hold up to scrutiny?
Well, none of them hold up to scrutiny. We are already energy dominant. The United States is the largest producer of oil and gas in the world. We produce more than we can use, so we are a net exporter. So this isn't about improving domestic supply. All of this oil is out in a global market, and prices are set by a global market. That's why we hear about OPEC increasing or reducing demand based on sort of global price of oil. So it's a global commodity. So we have fairly little say in the total price of oil, global price of oil. It won't reduce price at the pump. For those reasons and other more complex reasons, price at the pump is a combination of availability, refining capacity, global markets, local taxes. So that's yet another myth of this plan. And there's also thousands of existing leases off our shores that have been approved in the past that aren't being used. So the industry has access already. This seems more like an effort to cater to the oil companies and give them sort of a land grab, but there's no real rational justification. It's not going to make the lives of Americans any better. It will only jeopardize all the things that we know and love.
Mm-hmm. And another problem with the administration's argument is they are currently canceling plans and permits for renewable energy. Solar energy, wind energy, we're seeing these technologies come to scale. They're cost competitive and they're homegrown and they're renewable. So in terms of energy independence and dominance, why not support those efforts as well? So, this is part of a larger initiative of doubling down on oil and gas and frankly, pushing back on renewable energy, which is the future.
It also comes with risk, of course. So if these new leases are opened and operational, at what stage do we see the first ecological harm? And can you walk us through the life cycle of impacts?
Well, offshore drilling is an expansive process. There's major environmental harm through every part of it. It begins with the ocean exploration. It's called seismic airgun blasting, which is how oil companies search for oil beneath the seafloor. That noise pollution is devastating to whales and other types of marine life. You move into the drilling and processing of oil. That is the routine operations of offshore drilling. Pollutes our ocean, pollutes the air. Of course, we have oil spills. Oil spills happen all the time. The smaller ones tend not to be covered by the media. The larger ones can be catastrophic to marine ecosystems. You have onshore impacts with refineries and petrochemical facilities, really damaging to communities. And then, of course, climate change, right? The elephant in the room. This proposal would represent billions of metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions going into our atmosphere.
You mentioned the geographic area that's at risk. Is there one ecosystem that is more at risk or more sensitive among those?
I mean, they're all sensitive, right? They're vastly different. So you have the Gulf of Mexico, which is warmer tropical type environment. Historically, that area that they're proposing to open has actually been really important for domestic military exercises. Historically, it was protected as an act of security. Obviously, the California coast is one of the richest and most ecologically sort of dynamic places in the world. And this plan is proposed from San Diego to Humboldt, so it's the whole thing. And then, and Alaska too, right? It's multiple coastlines facing different directions. Also, one of the most ecologically rich areas on the planet. There's a reason why gray whales will swim 3,000 miles to feed up there. They're doing that because of how unbelievably sort of rich it is. So each area is sort of different, but equally important from an ecological standpoint. And obviously our ocean's all interconnected.
Pete, you mentioned climate change. Is there, or how should the public connect these new leases to climate risk? And then is there even a way to kind of rank the direct offshore imprint from the putting in of the, oil derrick to the larger impact of locking in decades of additional kind of combustion?
Yeah, well, as you noted, this would lock in decades of new oil and gas development. So the lifespan for these leases, it's 30, 40, 50 years. So really a generational impact. It's not just what happens over the next couple years. It really would commit us down this path of a significant investment in more oil and gas development and ultimately the burning of fossil fuels. Part of what the federal government is supposed to do as part of this process is an environmental analysis of what those impacts would be. Generally speaking, we're talking billions of metric tons of additional greenhouse gas emissions that would go into our atmosphere if this plan is approved.
Well, and David, just to add on to that, kind of if you're a lay person and you're thinking about, so how's this going to affect me at my beach? You have the oil spills, obviously, but 50 to 70% of our beaches are at risk from loss from sea level rise. Coral reefs are threatened if we increase the ocean temperature any further than it already is. So if you're a surfer or a beach goer, this opening these areas will certainly jeopardize like the next generation's ability to enjoy the coastlines. And so, we're already seeing those impacts, and this will just accelerate them and make them worse.
So I think it's worth kind of specifically saying who carries the risk, because obviously the oil companies and the shareholders would be the beneficiaries of the drilling, but who carries the risk, and does the oil industry cover all the costs of a mishap, or do local communities subsidize it?
Yeah, the public certainly subsidizes the costs of oil spills, of climate change, of all these different types of impacts. Coastal communities are certainly on the front lines. We've seen 2 major oil spills off the California coast just in the past 10 years, and that's a mess. It closes businesses, it hurts our local economies, tourism, recreation, all those types of things. With the Deepwater Horizon disaster in the Gulf of Mexico, that was over 200 million gallons of oil that was spilled. That cost public taxpayers $15 billion. Those costs were in terms of cleanup costs, lost economic opportunity, in terms of tourism, recreation, and fisheries. So, yeah, the costs of oil spills are really borne by the public. But then you scale up to issues around climate change. I mean, that's a global impact, and really hard to quantify the impact to other nations, to people around the world.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the earlier we talked about the massive opposition. So it's not just environmentalists and surfers and beachgoers. If you're a surf shop, if you're a hotel, if you're a coastal restaurant, if you're a coastal community, an oil spill is an existential threat to your financial well-being. The coastal tourism and recreation economy is orders of magnitude bigger than the oil and gas economy. So we have a thriving unbelievable coastal tourism and recreation economy in the United States, full of millions of small businesses that are thriving and will continue to thrive if we can keep our oceans and beaches healthy. That's why we're seeing tens of thousands of coastal small businesses come out in opposition to this plan. Commercial fishing communities. There's so many people who make their livelihoods, which are dependent on the healthy coasts and oceans, that are opposed to this. So all those people are taking on the risk and liability too, and that's why they don't want to see it.
Absolutely, yeah. How much power do the states have when the federal government is pushing towards this offshore drilling? How much power do we have as a state?
Well, the short answer is it's a federal government decision. This concerns offshore drilling in federal waters. The good news is the states do have power to push back, and there's a variety of ways they can do that. Certainly politically, we're seeing opposition grow from the bottom up, from local governments, from state legislatures, passing resolutions, making public statements. But state governments can also do things that make it more difficult and more expensive for oil companies to drill in federal waters. And so without going into detail, you are seeing steps being taken from California to Florida that would limit, for example, new offshore oil and gas infrastructure in either state waters or along the shoreline.
Got it.
Well, and just to add on to that too, we've seen, for example, the entire eastern seaboard was left off this plan. And we know why that is. That's because the last time this administration tried to propose opening the Atlantic, there was such bipartisan pushback up and down the East Coast, whether it was New York or South Carolina or Georgia or Florida, that they left it off the plan. So we know if there's strong state opposition, it's going to have an influence because we've seen that in the past. And right now, amazingly enough, 100% of the Florida delegation federally, Republican and Democrat, are opposing this plan. And the reason they're doing that is because a healthy ocean is so fundamental to the economy of Florida.
And the states are informed by these public hearings and comment periods like the Bureau of Land and Energy Management opened, correct?
That's correct, yeah. So we just had a public comment period that was open for 60 days. Nearly 300,000 comments submitted to the federal agency, almost all of which said, we don't want this offshore drilling plan. The federal government, however, did not hold any public meetings. And so one of the ways that Surfrider and our partners filled that gap is we organized people's hearings. So up and down the California coast, we created public space. We brought together elected officials, business leaders, fishermen, environmental justice champions, tribal representatives. All told, we had over 1,000 people attend these people's hearings. They were a forum to present public opposition. We got tremendous media coverage. We really galvanized, I think, this opposition that we're seeing coast to coast. And that really helped us generate so many comments to the federal government.
Are there important decision points or dates ahead that people should keep in mind?
Yes. So sometime this spring, potentially this summer, we are expecting the federal agency to issue that final draft of the offshore drilling plan. That will initiate a final public comment period that will be open for 90 days. So that will be the one final chance for the public to officially weigh in. And then we anticipate this plan could be finalized by the end of this year.
Okay. And in addition to the things already stated, is there anything that Surfrider is doing specifically to stop the plan?
Yeah, well, a number of things. We're continuing to organize in coastal communities around the country, build these business coalitions of tens of thousands of businesses that are opposing new offshore drilling. We have a Sign the Surfboard project that's getting a lot of interest. These surfboards are gathering signatures from coastal businesses up and down the coast essentially saying we don't want drilling off our coast. And this spring, Surfrider Foundation is organizing our annual Coastal Recreation Hill Day. And as part of that, we will meet with the federal government, not just members of Congress, but the federal administration. We're convening a business roundtable to bring those business voices and to take that message to DC that we can't avoid new offshore drilling off our coastlines.
Yeah, this comment period is closed, but local communities can still pass resolutions in opposition. We can still see state government come out. The public can continue to call their state and federal representatives and register their opposition. So we want to keep the pressure up, until the final ink is dry on the final plan, and our hope here is that the outcome is either these areas get pulled off the plan or the plan becomes so unpopular it just is stalled indefinitely, which is what happened last administration. But, we will be fighting this to the bitter end.
For listeners who are motivated, who don't want to wait for that comment period, let's say somebody has 1 hour this month to commit to the cause. Where would you recommend they spent that hour? And then if somebody has 10 hours this month, is there a different level of commitment that they could commit to?
Well, one way is to go to Surfrider Foundation's website, surfrider.org. You can visit our blog and our campaign page. We have very easy ways to take action. We currently have an activation to contact your member of Congress, which is a great way to take action. And if folks want to dive deeper, you can get involved with your local Surfrider chapter or club. We do all kinds of work from beach cleanups to water testing. But part of our campaign is this grassroots organizing. So like Chad said, going to city council meetings, helping support business opposition, educating the public about this issue. So yeah, lots of ways to get involved for folks who are interested.
And we make all those really easy to do. So by joining us, we'll help you do any of those things you want to do.
Yeah, that's how we're going to win this, is building our power from the bottom up.
Surfrider is not waiting for the federal government's next action. They are busy daily collecting real-time data from both the environmental and economic impacts of offshore drilling. They are organizing, amplifying, and sharing the voices from Democrats and Republicans, both of whom share unified opposition to this matter, and reminding the federal government about the desire of the people who will carry the risk, do not share in the profit, and will be most detrimentally impacted by offshore oil drilling. Preserving ocean health is essential for humanity's health. So if you're inspired to get involved, whether physically, verbally, or just through membership, you can do it at surfrider.org. My name is David Scales for the Surfrider podcast, brought to you by the Surfrider Foundation. We'll be back next month with an all-new episode, but until then, please follow and learn more at surfrider.org.